Today, we're wrapping up the NFC West and the entire NFC conference in its totality with one of the most feel-good teams in the NFL and one of the teams I actually called their record exactly right. The Los Angeles Rams. In this edition of Predictions versus Reality, we're going to be talking about the first place team and what happened with their season. We're going to look back at where I had them in August, where I projected them. We're going to reflect on what happened this year, and then we're going to talk about what they need to do to get better to ensure that they continue building forward. But before we begin, all right, and welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you're listening to the Shumake Take. Welcome in to Predictions versus Reality. The offseason series continues, and like I mentioned, the NFC is wrapping up. So, moving on to the AFC, where it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Admittedly, I like the AFC more than the NFC. I follow it a lot tighter just because of where I am. And, regional-wise, a lot of AFC teams are over here. So, hey, check it out. I like the NFC, but the AFC, in my opinion, is a lot better and a lot more fun conference to talk about. So we're going to move on into there. But that's not to say our team we're talking about right now with the Rams, we're boring. No, this was a great football team to talk about, and one that I called 100% right on their record. So where did I have them in August? Well, if you don't know what their record is, well, they finished 10-7, and that's where I had them projected. I had them projected there because I thought this team was good. Just not as great as other Rams teams, but at the same time, you still have weapons on offense. You have Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, Matthew Stafford, right? A decent O-line. They just actually signed their left tackle, Ulrich Jackson. I think his name is Ulrich Jackson or Ulrich Johnson. I can't remember. To an extension is like 3 years, $75 million. So they locked that part down. The other tackles have to be free agent, I believe. So locking down the left one was probably necessary. So they do that. Decent offensive line, and the defense just had a lot of young players, especially up front and in the secondary, which look where they at now. Wow, we're going to talk about it in a second. And then you look at guys like Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White, who are veterans, but honestly, most players on that defense are in year 4 or less. It's a very, very young unit. So just in retrospect, to look and see how well they did was pretty remarkable. But that all being said, I thought that they were going to have a good year, just not as impressive, or so it would seem. So they finished 10-7, and their offense ranked 10th, and their defense finished 26th. Their 3 best wins were against Minnesota 30-20 midway through the year, beating Buffalo 44-42 in what was my second best game of the year in my opinion. And then they beat Seattle 26-20 in overtime to help them take first place in the division from Seattle. So this season was really interesting for the Rams because their offense, while they finished 10th, was somewhat very productive, or was pretty productive. They finished 10th overall. Kyren Williams had a great year. He had 1,500 yards, I believe. Matthew Stafford continued to play well. Cooper Kupp had a down year. He was hurt a lot. But Puka Nacua had another fantastic year. He played most of the year. He only missed a handful of games. But when he was in there, he was awesome. He is a absolute just beast of a receiver. He plays receiver like a linebacker would. So great guy, great player. So the offense overall was pretty good. Was pretty darn good if I do say so myself. And the defense, they finished 26th. That doesn't do it justice. This defense was one of those units that got really, really good as the year went on. Their corners, they did struggle from in week 1 to week 18. They had their fair share of struggles. So that was a young unit, but at the same time, they really got better at getting turnovers. They were one of the better turnover creating teams. One of the best teams in the NFL at creating turnovers, especially later on at the end of the year. And that was sprung by the emergence of their defensive line, which with second-year player Byron Young, rookies, first-round, second-round pick, respectively, Jared Verse, who won Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Braden Fisk out of FSU. Right, both of those are FSU guys, actually. So seeing that unit, and then Kobe Turner, the other defensive tackle, this group became a top 10 defensive line by year's end. They were really, really, really good. And you look at what they were able to do in the wild card round and shut down the Vikings' high-flying offense. And then you look at what they did in Philly and slowed that offense down a little bit, not much. Saquon Barkley went off in that game, but they slowed down the passing game a lot. Granted, it was also snowing, but at the same time, they did go toe-to-toe in they were a 4th down conversion away from potentially beating them and going to the NFC Championship game. They were really close to beating Philly, and they probably came closer to beating Philly than any other team. Well, yeah, than any other team in the playoffs. Any other team. The Eagles whooped Green Bay. They whooped the Commanders in the NFC Championship game and whooped Kansas City in the Super Bowl. The Rams were the closest team to beat them, outside of the teams that absolutely blew past them, like the Bucs earlier in the year. But that was earlier in the year. What am I talking about? Whatever. Anyways, this team ended up being really, really good with it being all said and done. Specifically, what went good, the thing was, despite dealing with the injuries to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, I mentioned he played really well this year, but their backup receivers, veterans Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson, played pretty well. Demarcus Robinson caught a game-winning touchdown to beat Seattle in that game in overtime. And when Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp came back, this offense in the passing game was pretty productive. So it helped elevate this group. The depth really helped. And when these guys went down, they kept the production up. They weren't obviously the best, right? They're veterans. They've been around the league for a while. But it was enough to keep this offense productive and keep it producing like it needed to. Kyron Williams took a little bit more of a workload there, but he was up for the task. The second thing that happened to help the Rams get to where they were was the young players on defense stepping up. I already mentioned, the guys on the defensive line, but also rookie corner Cam Kitchens. They signed free agent Cam Curl. Then guys like Quentin Lake, Akella Witherspoon, all of them played decent by the end of the year. They're all playing pretty decently well. And despite all the passing yards they were allowing, they were getting a lot of turnovers, a lot of pass breakups. So they weren't making big plays to make up for the fact that their secondary was a little shaky, but this group was very young. So I expected it to have a little bit of a struggle, kind of like when the Bucs did in 2019. They had Sean Murphy-Bunting as a rookie, Jamel Dean, and Carlton Davis. All three of those guys were rookies in 2019. And all three of them started. Their secondary was pretty rough, but they had some good moments. And then 2020, they were a really, really good unit, and they won the Super Bowl. So, hey, that checks out. Anyways, along with that, overall, the defensive line I mentioned as well was a top 10 unit this year, if not just outside. Byron Young, Jared Verse was one of the best young edge duos in the NFL. Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner collapsed offensive lines week in and week out. They were a fantastic unit and probably the best position group on the entire Rams team. They were great. And then when they got into the playoffs, they absolutely played out of their minds. They played out of their freaking minds. They went off against the Vikings and completely destroyed Sam Darnold. And then against Philly, they got 7 sacks on Philly. They were able to get pressure on Jalen Hurts consistently. So what a great playoff performance by this defensive line. And it really showed what this group can be. I expect them to be a top 5 unit next year. I don't do way too early predictions or bold predictions like that very often, but one of my bold predictions is that this defensive line will be a top 5 unit next year. I'm willing to bet on that. They were really, really good this year by year's end, and with how young they are, there is a lot of room to grow. So, a lot of excitement to be there. The fourth thing that contributed to the Rams going 10-7, though, this one's kind of a little bit more boring, but it has to be mentioned. The Rams had a lot of injuries on offense, so especially to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, they were able to adapt and play to their strengths, kind of like the Bills. Not as talented of the bunch, right? But they were able to utilize their players and utilize their strengths and get good production out of them. And you want to know why Sean McVay is in the playoffs all the time with the Rams? That's exactly why, because he understands each and every one of his players and knows how to adapt the scheme around them to make it work and get the most out of them. There's a reason why he's considered a QB guru, why he coaches one of the best offenses in the NFL every single year, it feels like. It's because he does the little things right, and that includes adapting to your players, whether there's an injury or not, an ability to maximize their talents to get the best production out of them. So there you go. That's why they upset Minnesota, because they were able to out-scheme them, and they nearly beat Philly because they were able to out-scheme them and go toe-to-toe with them despite the lack of overall talent on their offense compared to the stars that they had, that the Eagles and Vikings had on defense, and also what they had on their offenses as well, right? So they were able to out scheme and go toe to toe. They destroyed the Vikings and were able to go toe to toe and nearly beat the Eagles. That has a lot to do with coaching, and that has a lot to do with Sean McVay and also their defensive coordinator. I can't remember his name, but he also deserves a lot of credit for how this defense really improved as the year went on. So anyways, how can the Rams get better? What now? So I want to start here with the big three needs. Number one is offensive line. The offensive line was good, just not great last year. They could use an upgrade there. And the Rams, while they could be out of the running for one of these young guards in the first round, maybe you draft someone in the second. There's a couple guys in the second round that could go, right? So I could see that. Number two is wide receiver. Wide receiver, I would want to put that as a bigger need because they're probably going to draft that in the first round potentially. But I don't know. It's interesting to see what they're going to do. I think they need to go offensive line in the first round, but I just don't know who's going to be available for them there. But wide receiver could be the next option because here's the thing. Cooper Kupp's going to be traded. He's already that's already been said and done. He is out as the Rams wide receiver too. So that leaves Puka Nacua, and then that leaves a bunch of veterans depth guys. So you need to draft someone else. You don't have a first round pick at receiver, so go get a premium position. Go get a premium guy at a premium position to continue to build that offense and continue to have success there, which I think would be the right move. The third one's linebacker. The defensive line and the secondaries are kind of set for the Rams. Secondary is a little bit more iffy, right? Maybe you can add a veteran corner in there and help because you can never have too many good corners. So there is that. Maybe you add a safety. But overall, that group, along with the defensive line, they're set. They're set, ready to go. But linebacker, one of those guys at starting level is set to be a free agent. And also, they really need young talent in there. I'm looking at maybe it would be a reach, but maybe Jahad Campbell out of Alabama, the best linebacker prospect in the draft. There's a lot of guys on day 3 that I really, really like. So there's no reason the Rams don't draft a linebacker, and they maybe sign one too. There's some quality veteran linebackers out there that can start immediately. So you pair those two guys up, and then you lock down the only part of your defense that really needs a true upgrade. So you add that, and bam, you got a young defense that's ready to take the next step forward, and you add pieces on offense that are younger, so you continue to go into transition. But to wrap it all up, the next thing that they need, this is kind of a fourth need. Well, it is a fourth need, really, in my opinion. It's quarterback. I want to talk about it for a second because this Matthew Stafford situation is weird. So he went out, tried to get a trade. No one wanted him. And so he comes back. They're going to sign a new extension, get him some more money. And it's the right move. Matthew Stafford needs to be on a team that is winning, that is ready to compete. And the Rams also need that. They're a team that's that's still in win now mode. They've been able to build up this defense back up to being really good after all their veteran players left. And so now they have that, and now they have an offense that's still really good. Matthew Stafford's still a good quarterback. So you add a receiver there, add to this offensive line, and make it better, and you're still going to have a team that's going to compete for at least the NFC Championship game. They're going to be in that conversation, barring something crazy happening. So keeping the Stafford there at the Rams is important. It's best for both sides. But that being said, Matthew Stafford's 37. You got to figure out a replacement for him, which is why I think they should draft a quarterback in this draft. Despite the fact that not a lot of people are high on this draft class, a lot of people aren't high on anybody outside of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Even then, that's a debate. And there's a couple people that are like, oh, Jackson Dart could be something, or Dylan Gabriel could be something. And it's like, I don't know about that. Well, some people talk about Will Howard, but he had a horrible combine. But I don't know. That's not really. He's throwing to receivers that he doesn't really know, so I can't really judge him for that compared to what he did at Ohio State. Right? The tape on Ohio State for Will Howard was pretty darn good. But anyways, when you have a guy like Sean McVay, who's a really good quarterback coach and a really good offensive mind, you have more possibilities of who you can draft at quarterback. Because the Rams are going to be in win now mode, they need a quarterback that can come in, sit, and develop. And I'm looking at Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe could be an option. I don't know if he's the right scheme fit, but he's an ultra talented quarterback, and out of all the situations Jalen Milroe could go to have the highest chance of success, the Rams are on that list. So he can sit, learn behind Matthew Stafford while his team goes on and continues winning games. That would be a really good situation for Jalen Milroe. I'm also looking at a guy like Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart. These guys that are more of gunslingers that kind of, were like Matthew Stafford coming out of Georgia in that same type of archetype, mold of player in that type of sense. So these guys, the problem is they were in run-based offense. They're more about heavy play action. So I don't know how much that fits with the more West Coast-ish style that the Rams go with, although they do run the ball a lot with Kyren Williams. So it's a little bit of a mix. That being said, those could be players that would fit. There's a guy you can take in the third round, or a player you can take in the fourth round, right? So there's going to be players available, quarterbacks available there for you to take. It's just a matter of, okay, does this guy have enough upside where, okay, we can draft him, sit him for a year or two while Matthew Stafford is here, and when he leaves, he can slot in and play right away and play at a high level. Can you do that? Maybe. And the Rams are probably one of the best teams to be able to take a swing like that because they're a really good football team. They're not going to be picking high in the draft very often. I don't expect them to be picking high in the draft often at all over the next few years. So I think you can get away with drafting a quarterback in this draft and letting them sit and develop. I think with the coaching that you have, with the team that you have, I think that's a possibility for the Rams. And you look at Jackson Dart, you look at a guy like Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, even Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel. These are guys that in the right situations with a great team around them, I think that they could be successful NFL quarterbacks. I know a lot of people aren't high on them, but I think if they go to the right situation, and the Rams are a great situation, I think that they could have success. So the Rams have more possibilities there, and I expect them to draft one, or at least, there should be speculation that they're going to. But that being said, wrapping up officially, this roster overall is very young, and a lot of their players were drafted by the team themselves. So they really don't need very much other than just time. And time is something that they will have. They will get better next year, and I think they're going to win the NFC West next year. Way too early to predict that, but I expect that happening. And as I mentioned, with the NFC West all making improvements, I expect them all to make improvements. The Rams are no different, and they're going to need to improve these big three spots if they want to keep going. But that being said, watch the defensive line. It's going to be a top 5 unit in football next year. Mark it, book it, bold it right now. But the Rams are going to be a very exciting team to follow this offseason because this team could be a Super Bowl contender by this time, or be a Super Bowl champion by this time next year, but at least be a Super Bowl contender when we go back next year to talk about this team again in 2026. But for now, that is going to do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. It'll help the channel out tremendously. It only takes a couple of seconds. So I'd appreciate it if you guys would do that, and will continue to help me grow my platform and spread my football passion to more and more people. Also, make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know who you think the Rams are going to draft in the first round, who you want them to get in free agency, right? Where do you think the Rams are going to be next year? You think the defensive line is going to be top 5? Do you think this team is going to take a step forward and be a Super Bowl contender again? You see, if you want them to draft a quarterback in the later rounds, who do you want them to draft? I want to know all your thoughts, Ram fans, in the comments. And also, make sure you guys share the video, whether it's by word of mouth or by social media, getting everybody locked in and locked on to the Shumake Take podcast, coming out with great content for you guys every single week. But that being said, that will do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys have enjoyed. And we will be starting with the AFC in the next batch of videos coming out. But until then, I will see you guys next time.